Our top focus, Indian President Ram Nath Kovind will take his first overseas trip from October 4th to the 7th of October, but it is no routine goodwill trip of the kind undertaken by ceremonial heads of states. It will be the first time an Indian dignitary will be visiting Djibouti, a tiny country at the mouth of the Suez Canal, which is of crucial strategic importance to the United States, France, China, and now India. But why is this small country so important? We're on senior foreign editor Padma Rao explains.
It will be his first overseas trip and one laden with geopolitical significance. The choice of the small Red Sea country Djibouti and neighbouring Ethiopia as President Ram Nath Kovind's venues is far from coincidental. Djibouti is a small, stable country in a turbulent region. Ethiopia, which houses the African Union headquarters, is the only African country to have never been colonized. And India's interests in both has been growing in leaps and bounds. Camp Lemonnier, the largest US military base in Africa, is located at Djibouti Airport, but so is China's, right next to it. The United States uses its base as a hub for reconnaissance drones and to keep an eye on the disturbed region very close to embattled Yemen. China remains inscrutable about why it's there, but it needs no degree in international studies to guess why. Djibouti is a key partner in China's One Belt, One Road initiative. Beijing has invested millions of dollars in the country crucially located at the mouth to the Suez Canal, one of the world's busiest shipping routes. It has already helped connect Ethiopia with Djibouti by building a railroad and is also constructing air and seaports. It will pay $100 million for setting up its base there, so Djibouti is more than interested. The presence of the United States and France has more to do with how close it is to disturbed regions like Yemen, which is barely 20 miles away and where there is a full-fledged war involving Saudi Arabia and many of its allies. Plenty of former Indian presidents have visited Ethiopia. Djibouti dignitaries have visited India, but Mr. Kovind's arrival in Djibouti will be a first-timer for any Indian head of state. Djibouti has an embassy in New Delhi, but India has none in the African country. Ties so far have been restricted to education, skills and medical training, but in today's world, it's all about geostrategy and gaining an edge. President Kovind's visit may have come later than those of China or the United States, but as the saying goes, it's better too late than to never have tried. Padma Rao, WION.
And we'll talk more about the significance of this tiny nation in Africa of Djibouti. And I'm pleased to welcome Ambassador Gurjeet Singh. He has served, apart from many other countries, as the ambassador to Africa as well. Sir, thanks so much for joining us. Let me start by asking you, though our senior foreign editor has pointed out some of the things, but in layman's terms, can you explain to us why this tiny country is so important strategically for India or any other country in the world like the United States, Japan or France per se?
Thank you. Well, Djibouti is tiny, but its strategic value is immense. This is mainly because it is on the mouth of the
Suez Canal.
And between Yemen, which is the Gulf of Aden, and the Gulf of Tajura, where a large amount of the world's shipping pass, including about 40% of Chinese imports, actually pass through these areas. Much of our imports also pass through these areas. Djibouti is also important because it is like a little oasis of calm between a troubled Somalia and a troubled Yemen and a little bit of Eritrea on the north. Djibouti is further important because one of the engines of Africa today is Ethiopia. And the bulk of Ethiopian exports and imports come from the port of Djibouti because Ethiopia is now landlocked. So this all gives Djibouti a very strong strategic perspective, and it follows the policy of welcome to all.
Right. So we see the Indian president will be traveling to Djibouti and Ethiopia, as you mentioned, but no one above the rank of a junior minister in the last so many years has made that effort to recognize Djibouti of this importance, such strategic importance. Other countries seem to have realized that quite early on. US, France, Japan, there are 5 other countries who already realized that. Why do you think it's taken India so long, looking at China's expanding interests at the same time there?
I think our approach to Africa is different from the Chinese and other people's approach. Our approach is a human resource development approach, and our approach is one to contribute to the development of countries. So we never really had any strategic sense of why we need to build a relationship with Djibouti, but we've had a long military engagement with Ethiopia since the time of Emperor Haile Selassie, or with Kenya and Uganda for that matter, and Sudan. At the same time, we have built a little known cement plant in Ali Sebir in Djibouti, which today is the place where the Chinese are doing a water pipeline to bring water from Ethiopia into the dry Ali Sebir of Djibouti. So we were there first. We built the cement plant. We helped them to build a power plant, which has actually created employment. And we've also done a lot of human resource development.
But we didn't further our strategic interests. That is what, do you think that is the aim right now? Or will it continue to be providing aid, providing infrastructure like we've been doing in the past? Or do you think, looking at China, India will try and shift the tactic or the way it approaches this particular region?
I think we are thinking ahead, but I believe two of the reasons out of three why China is there don't really apply to us. For instance, our peacekeeping forces in Africa don't use Djibouti as a supply base. We use it in other ways. Chinese want to do it that way. The Chinese want to also use it as an evacuation point for the growing number of Chinese nationals. We have used it from Yemen earlier and now, and you see that even without having a formal base or a strategic agreement, the amount of support Djibouti gave us to evacuate our nationals from Yemen, with our teams led by General V.K. Singh parked there, our aircraft coming and going, our ships coming and going, was not insignificant. And in the past, we have done various exercises even at large fleet levels. And all Indian ships which come from the Black Sea ports or from the United States through the Suez always have stopped at Djibouti. So Djibouti has been on our strategic horizon, but perhaps not a strategic place for us in a formal sense.
Absolutely. Give us some sense into the Indian diaspora in Djibouti. There are not many Indians, but there are a considerable number of Indians. And, you know, what's the way ahead? From Djibouti's point of view, where does India stand in its scheme of things if you compare the other countries that have a strong presence over there?
Today, Djibouti is 40 years old as an independent country. They became independent in 1977. And that's the same time that Somalia imploded. So they are the little oases of calm. Now, when they were dependent entirely on Ethiopia for assistance, much of the relationship with them was dependent on what kind of relationship we had with Ethiopia. And as that grew better, our relationship with Djibouti grew better. And the first visit by the president of Djibouti actually takes place when this happened, and the second visit too. When Djibouti opened up its economy to greater interest from the United Arab Emirates, you saw a large number of new Indians coming in there with the companies from Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which was an indirect way, but Indians were there. Somebody used to joke that all the barbers in Djibouti were Indian, so were the accountants. But today you find many more professionals because, you know, big companies from the UAE are based in Djibouti, run the airport, run the customs, run the hotels, run many things, and they have a large number of Indians with them. But yes, there is an old diaspora when Djibouti and Yemen, particularly Aden, the port of Aden, were closely linked by the old colonial trade between the British and the French at that time, and many Indian families are still there from that period, and they are very pro-India, and I think they will be feeling very proud today that the president is actually in Djibouti.
Absolutely. Now, is India and, you know, with this trip, will this be a new chapter in their ties is another question, because when you talk about Djibouti, they opened an embassy in New Delhi back in 2004. But India has not done that. There is no embassy in Djibouti, unlike other countries, US and China. Will that be an important step if that happens?
You see, I think India's attitude of opening embassies, much like African countries, is to develop economic relations. So we have not given the due to Djibouti on the economic side, mainly because we are focused on Ethiopia, and our embassy in Ethiopia with a very efficient honorary council in Djibouti runs our efforts. Japan, when they opened their defense base, had no embassy there. So the embassy and the strategic perspective, which is more regional, is not really, I think, necessary. One of the other reasons is there is the combined joint task force, Horn of Africa, which the Americans run out of Djibouti, which brings in many Western and other countries. India has never been a part of the combined joint task force Horn of Africa,
Okay.
which means we were not there. But when we fought piracy, then our ships started coming on operational reasons to Djibouti very often, even without having a base over there.
But not the way, let's say, China is, leveraging on Djibouti and its location. And do you think India will be able to manage success? And because it has ignored Djibouti in a sense for that long, and have we, over a period of time, underestimated its strategic importance, and are we now beginning to realize that?
I don't think we have underestimated it, but I feel that it was not part of a strategic concern because we had other alternatives around. But yes, this is an important alternative. Secondly, I believe that strategy alone is not guiding us in Djibouti. But if we were, for instance, to ask for a base over there, I'm sure they would not say no to us. They are very friendly to us. To my mind, a better strategy towards Djibouti is to do more projects there, more transport, road, rail and related projects. There is this railway between Addis and Djibouti which has been refurbished by China. We need to compete with those infrastructure projects, and there is an opportunity from the new port of Tajura in the north to go into the north of Ethiopia to facilitate the potash trade which Ethiopia wants to do. They need a railway line. It is those kind of things that we need to really plan, and I don't think we need to compete with the Chinese simply because they opened a base. To me, it is neither alarming nor a copybook exercise.
All right, Ambassador Singh, thanks so much for joining us here. Let's hope something constructive, productive comes out of the President's visit, because nobody from India really has made an effort, but now the government has decided this. Let's see if President Kovind can manage to strike the right chords. Thanks so much, sir, for joining us here.